Hi, and welcome to heaven. This is Raquel Alves
Julia Kibildo.
and we're back and so soon. I'm so proud of us. Like,
Oh, that's
hello.
fun. Wow. Really on the roll. The unemployment for me is really making this much easier.
Hey, good things, can be seen in the most desperate situations.
Exactly. It's an
How are you
opportunity,
doing?
It's not an obstacle, it's an opportunity. Sounding
Yeah.
like, my favorite LinkedIn warriors.
Really. So yeah, how are you doing? How have you been?
I'm all right. You know, hanging on.
I'm doing. I'm being.
I'm going. I'm being. I'm existing. I'm here. I'm speaking. I'm having thoughts. I'm having a lot of thoughts. So, it's
There are
good.
too many thoughts.
Yeah, honestly, too many thoughts. But thankfully we have this podcast so I can express at least some of them, the ones that are like politically appropriate.
Or not, depending on how much our wine is hitting.
That's right.
But yeah, I just moved to my aunt's house because I'm pet sitting her little menaces of a cat. So my days have been work and cats. For
Working hands, nothing more.
nothing more for the past few days.
Well, it could
But
be worse. It could be just work, but it's work and cats. So.
yeah, there's always some romantic element to it, I guess. But yeah, welcome. We're not going to be talking about our desperate lives. We're going to be talking to you about fame, which is what we don't have. We're talking
Yeah.
about yet, yeah. We're talking about we saw this little video reel by John and Theresa, one of our queens, one of our biggest references, and she made this very interesting video about celebrities versus influencers and how celebrities are distancing themselves from influencers in this so-called fame hierarchy. And she was mostly looking at this through Coachella
Yeah.
and how both of them were dressing in very different ways. So you would have celebs dressing more down and distancing themselves from influencers who would overdress. And yeah, it was like a whole debate about fame and the fame hierarchies that exist and how, who is more famous than whom, and how do we keep the status quo within fame. So this is what I'm going to be talking about today. Just rephrasing it that it is very much fully inspired by Jonathan Teresa's little mini reel that you should definitely check out, but it definitely credits to her on this.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of like got us thinking on some things that we were already kind of referencing in our previous conversation, about this idea of whether, if everyone is famous because fame has been sort of democratized through social media, is there space for anyone to truly be famous anymore? Because, if everyone has their 15 seconds of fame, or if anyone can amass like millions of following, is there truly such thing as real fame? And I feel like that was kind of really well referenced in her discussion, that the pool of famous people is kind of tiering itself naturally as well, because this hierarchy sort of needs to be maintained. I mean, we live in a very, competitive society. There's been like social hierarchies since the
Mhm.
beginning of time, and I feel like they kind of form naturally because of different circumstances, and it's happening right now in the celebrity pool. So you have a couple of tiers. You have actors, celebrities who are famous for their work and their trade, I suppose.
Yeah.
So like models, actors, singers, etc. And then you have influencers who kind of transcended just from the online space into the physical. I would say like maybe Emma Chamberlain, who I think, started off as the it girl influencer, but is now kind of more known for her podcast, her writing, her other work, and, maybe YouTubers, people who have been around for a while. They're kind of more established. They may have started as influencers, but, they've kind of moved on from it or started their own things, their own brands, etc. You have the reality TV stars who, appeared on TV shows, and then you have the purely online influencers who are just famous from what they do online and the community they have there.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think it's quite interesting to categorize it and to see whether they are actually trying to, separate themselves from one another, and how they're fighting for the spotlight. I feel like, it's a bit like Hunger Games because there's so many of them right now and almost it feels like a little competition of who's gonna shine brighter in the mass.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Because as you're saying, and it has how it's been referenced before, is not something that it is that intentional. It just comes off naturally. And to me, what I find it the most interesting is how, without being on purpose, the influencer industry kind of really shaped a little bit what
Absolutely.
it means to be famous, and this whole hierarchy really like shifted a little bit. And of course, whoever's at the top will never say to your face that they're threatened, but that was felt, and they've definitely reacted. And I really think I don't know, I find this idea very interesting, how being accessible and being more accessible and the fame being more accessible made the whole idea of being exclusive and not being out in the open so much the new status symbol.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. Like being a bit mysterious,
yeah,
not sharing too much about your personal life, being overly private, kind of keeping to yourself, maintaining that aura of exclusivity. It's almost analogical to like luxury brands that do very limited product drops and they're only accessible to a certain pool of customers. It's very similar to that, I think.
yeah, and I think it really shifted because I don't know, back in the day, the biggest stars, you would see them everywhere, and that's why they were famous and that's why they were celebrities. But because we democratize that, we need to have a distinction. The less you are visible, the better. And I think something interesting, speaking about Amber Chamberlain, for example, is the fact that she really transcended the influencer status, because influencers, in order to remain relevant, they need to keep posting. They need to keep appearing, which is contradictory because that also contributes to the value of their status. And Emma Chamberlain reached such a role that she overpassed that, and it's a privilege for her to not have to post to remain relevant. And I just
Yeah,
think
exactly.
all very interesting.
Yeah, it's a very interesting phenomenon. As you said, back in the day, the people who we considered famous were the people you would see on TV or in like magazines or tabloids or like pop culture magazines like Bravo and stuff like that. And I feel it was curated for us who we should be looking for. I feel like that's also an important distinction that celebrities not only happened, they were made by the industry in a way because, they were noticed and then they were elevated to that celebrity status. And I feel like right now, anyone can fend for themselves because social media gives you a platform to do so. And so if you manage to amass a community and they respond to whatever you're saying, that's enough because social media gives you the platform to connect with them without the middleman. So you have direct access to millions of people, to like almost the entire world's population at the tip of your finger. And there is, obviously there is other media that emphasizes that, but media is also very much, influenced by what's happening on social media right now as well. So it's almost like something booms on social media and then it goes into magazines, etc., as opposed to the other way around as it was back in the day. A good example would be like the person who recorded the very demure, very mindful video.
Yes, 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 yes.
I feel like that's the perfect example of that because it was literally a 15 seconds of fame that allowed them to, get a brand deal, really boom online. There were articles about it in Vogue,
Crazy.
it's like in like The Guardian and all these massive newspapers. And I feel like it really visualizes that phenomenon of how easy it is to become famous, even for a second. But even that allows you to gain such a platform so quickly that if you really utilize it smartly, you can really jump off from there and do your own thing afterwards. You just have to keep posting and you just have to ride on the tide, so to speak. But it's way easier in a way than it was before, but at the same time, it feels harder because there's so many fish in the sea. It's hard to be the one that, shines the brightest, so to speak.
Yeah, because I'm glad you brought that example up of that person, because the other day I was on TikTok, and by the way, I've always knew all those 15 seconds of fame and the whole virality of that moment, I only knew it through secondary sources, either
Yeah.
like seeing those articles on those magazines or video essays on it or like people talking about it from a secondary perspective. I never actually saw that video on my feed ever. And the other day, like literally not too long ago, probably yesterday or 2 days ago, a video of that person came through my feed naturally. And it was just the 10-second video of her being like along the lines of, I can't believe this is my life after saying the word demure for 10 seconds. And it just shows New York skyline way, like kind of like showing how, she's
No
living in
way.
the of lives. And I went to see the comments on that because I was like, oh my God, that's a demure girl. What? Like she's gone to me, like she's gone completely. And I went to see the comments, and a lot of people are saying things like, besides the ones criticizing, the fact that, like, why is this person famous, blah, blah, blah. Some people are saying, oh, you deserve it, slay, blah, blah, blah. Like, oh, yeah, we made the right person famous. No, no. And I'm like, did we though? Because no hate to that person. Like, she's just a normal person. But, like, what did she do of relevant? Absolutely nothing. Like, does she really deserve that fame? Does she really deserve that money coming through? I don't know. Like, it's just very random, and she is very irrelevant in a sense of a culture phenomenon because it was a moment and it's gone. And if she wants to stay relevant, there's nothing more to her brand in a way than
Exactly.
the word than you, which I think when we're talking about this context of accessibility, yeah, we allow this random person to have fame and to be able to, I don't know, be in a hotel in New York apparently. But is this type of accessibility that good? I think that's the question that
Yeah,
I'm kind of.
exactly. And I feel like then it kind of comes down to that where that distinction happens of what we just talked about with the different tiers of celebrities. I feel like bringing cultural value is the thing that becomes
Mhm.
kind of like the currency. And I mean cultural value, but that's kind of like in the broader sense. Obviously, a lot of people would argue that, the Kardashians are not culturally valuable, or things like that. But I mean, like having more tangible impact on pop culture and the world in general, and kind of being present in a more tangible way in the industry is what distinguishes those people, I think. Whether it is, if you have something important to say, or whether it is that you're running a brand that's, relevant for a lot of people, or whether it is that you have a body of work that kind of represents who you are. I feel like these things become the distinguishers that allow people to kind of get to that higher tier of celebdom, so to speak. And I think it was Jordan Teresa who brought this up in that short video. What I find interesting is, for example, the phenomenon of reality TV stars.
Mhm.
That even they are on like a slightly higher tier than the online influencers because they appeared in a TV space, so they transcended from the online. And it's something that, I found quite interesting because a lot of people would argue that reality TV is like trash TV. It doesn't really bring a lot of, that cultural value that I spoke of earlier, but that's kind of what I mean. It's, it doesn't have to be anything of particular importance or, pathos or, bringing real change to the world, so to speak. But it's just appearing elsewhere and transcending the online space and having something that kind of distinguishes you from that purely online community, because everyone is online now and it's not hard to be online. Obviously, it's hard to be an influencer. It's actually quite a difficult job if you're doing it like full time.
Yeah, I think that's also why influencers who do become successful are never just doing influencing
Yeah,
anymore. And also how a lot of them also start creating their own businesses is because the influencers out of all this group are the most volatile to fame because they depend on a much more non-reliable resource that is the platform, the online
yeah,
social media platform. And they're also way more dependable on the general public than, for example, a movie star is, like
exactly.
even if a movie star gets a lot of backlash, they'll still they'll probably still go make movies and they'll still have access to this celebrity status. But an influencer, as soon as she gets backlash, it will gonna cut on her, bank account straight away. And I think we've already seen this rotation of irrelevancy with internet stars that kind of came before. For example, stars that were now YouTubers or like older YouTuber crowds that then disappeared, that they were
Yeah,
super famous, or like Vine internet stars who then disappeared. Why? Because they were so connected to a just one platform and there was nothing more to them to
yeah,
become.
exactly.
But so they were very famous for a while, but then that status disappeared because it's just way more not reliable. I also
Exactly.
see influencers a bit as vessels for exposure, and they're way more replaceable. If you're not famous anymore or you're not having millions of views anymore, the brands will not reach to you ever again. So they are way more replaceable exactly because there are so many of them that
Exactly.
they just get replaced, and that's why they will never reach a celebrity status because they're just so replaceable and there's just so many that yeah, you can't stand out really. Like it,
Exactly. And
it goes back to the same talking over and over again, but it's true.
yeah, and I feel like it's almost, it's gonna become like the next job market almost, because in a few years it will probably be like, oh, if your audience isn't that like very specific targeted audience, the brand will not work with you anymore because you don't appeal to that certain demographic that they're trying to target. Or, the requirements are gonna get so much higher and higher and higher, and like 3 million views or like 5 million views isn't going to cut it anymore. And yeah, I feel this all comes down to, influencers having to diversify their portfolio and kind of diversifying their efforts and what they're doing. And there is, plenty of examples of influencers, as you said, starting their own businesses, some of them successful, like Emma Chamberlain. I think it's difficult to transcend that influencer space because even when you start your own brand, it's nearly always very closely tied to you and your influencer persona as well. So, if one of them gets backlash, the other one gets it too. I feel like it's very hard to reach such a high status or make a brand that's so relevant, or that's so needed, or that's brings other sort of value besides being a brand of your favorite influencer, that is able to stand alone and separate from your influencer persona.
Yeah, I also feel that, yeah, being an influencer can bring a lot of rewards, but it is also a very complicated place to be because when we think about celebrities, they are in fact aspirational. They're not meant to be normal people,
Yeah,
never we expect them to be because they are like movie stars. Even reality TV stars have a lot of wealth, so they're meant to shock. You know, the Kardashians are what they are because of all their money, but it's because of their shock value towards like us, the normal, that we still keep enjoying and consuming whatever they put out. And I think for an influencer, they're really in this, they act and live and make content in this very contradictory ground that is, you will become famous the more relatable you are, but then the more famous you become, the less relatable you are. So you're just like in this cycle of constantly irrelevancy in a way. And how can you really stand out or transgress to a new social status if the point of your role is to be relevant and to be relatable at all times? But the only way you can reach a better famous status
yeah,
is
it's
to
to stop being relatable anymore. Exactly.
and essentially to also stop posting because as we clarified so far in our arguments, to not post is the new status symbol, to not be online is the new privilege, is the new celebrity status. So
Exactly.
how is an influencer gonna act, in this new social order in a way? That's also it's hard to be an influencer, I feel like nowadays.
Exactly. And I'm glad you brought this up because what also Jordan Teresa argued in her video was on the Coachella example was that, celebrities who are in that higher tier, like singers, actors, whatnot, the videos that we see of them at Coachella are videos taken by other people from sneakily.
Mhm.
It's not them posting. They're just there in like casual outfits, very low key, just enjoying themselves, trying trying to stay off the grid, trying to not be noticed and just have a good time, as opposed to other influencers who are there on brand deals and who are there to make content, who are there to be exactly the opposite, who are there to be visible, who are there essentially to work and not to have fun. And I mean, obviously, work in quotation marks, but obviously it's different. Like they're not there, they didn't pay for it themselves. The accommodation that they're in is also probably sponsored. And well, it's an amazing opportunity for them, I'm sure. And, a lot would argue that it's a better type of work than your regular 9 to 5. It also comes with its, challenges. You're not there to just have a good time and enjoy yourself. You cannot really be in the moment because all you have to think about is how should I make a video about it so that, I fulfill the objectives of my contract that I have with the brand who sent me there. And
Mhm.
I feel like that's where this distinction really shines through. Like they are there hustling, and the higher tier of celebrities is there to have fun. And
Yeah.
and I
And
guess, then you can ask yourself, is it worth it? Like
yeah, and when I was thinking about this, it's also a very similar discussion between the old money, new money kind of discussions, and how we see all these influencers, since there's so many, all dressing like in very obnoxious ways because it's mostly to promote a certain piece of clothing or the brand that brought them there or whatever. Also, another thing that maybe some people don't know, and I actually learned this quite recently, is that the more color contrasting your videos are, the better they perform as well on the platforms, which that's also why they dress so flashy because they know that's
wow.
gonna get more views. Yeah, yeah. And sometimes when we see all these people together, of course, none of them stand out and they kind of can look in contrast with the celebrities that are way more toned down, a bit tacky. And it kind of brings in all this quiet luxury deaths from last or 2 years ago, kind of in
Yeah.
on how, being quiet about how you dress is seen much more proper, some say demure, of you than to be this flashy, almost tacky grounds of the influencer. Which kind of brings in another topic of that the influencers represent the masses
Yeah.
in a way of society, and the celebrities are like the wealthy few
Yeah,
percent of the
exactly.
population. So they always stay above just because they're not part of the mass. And when we think about, these masses kind of having more accessibility to a fame place as Coachella, is it really we still consider a privilege to be brought in by a brand because Coachella is expensive as fuck, by the way, is super expensive. So
Yeah,
is it really a privilege? At first we thought, yeah, of course, if you go there with a brand, that's a privilege, you don't have to pay. But is it anymore when celebrities do pay to go there to just go have fun and you go for free, but you have to go there for work?
exactly.
So, so aren't
Like
they?
going on a work trip, It's like when people
Yeah.
are like, wow, your job is sending you to another country to go on a delegation. And you're like, yeah, I'm just in meetings
Yeah,
all
but I'm
day.
working.
And then I go to the hotel to eat and sleep. I don't even have time to like explore the space. And it's kind of similar in a way.
It is. And like, isn't the real privilege actually in Emma Chamberlain, who, as an influencer, paid our entry to go there, have fun instead of going to work?
Exactly.
So it's just see things like really switching up in terms of how we see privilege to a point that like now we have the masses working for us and the celebs can just go have fun. So that's how we see the hierarchy really working in like, real ground in like real space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like, it's very layered. Like there's so many layers to it. I feel like influencers, they are still aspirational to us, the common
Mhm.
people, but at the same time, they are aspiring to those
Yeah.
who are above them. So they're kind of, the middle ground. And there's different tiers of fame when it comes to the influencer world as well, which, are obviously classified with the following that you have. And, some of them have 10 million and some of them have a couple 100,000. And that's a massive difference in your status. Yeah, I feel like it's a very nuanced and relatively new phenomenon that we're observing. And I feel like I'm quite interested to see how it develops when, the world moves more and more into that online space and everyone is turning to influencing because it's such a lucrative source of income, and it sounds so promising. And us included, we have these thoughts like, what if I just drop it all and I try to move online and I try to start a career on there? Maybe that's the place to be. Maybe I'm missing out. Yeah, it's very interesting to see where that goes, where more and more and more and more people start joining.
Yeah, but I'm also wondering, with that, how will the industry actually grow? Because if we are seeing that the profession itself is being devalued, because now it's entering the entertainment industry in general, that is, in competition in a way with all these other categories within celebrities and fame, will it still be very attractive? The more people join, the more it devalues because the more it belongs to the masses. So it is making fame more accessible, but is it really that accessible anymore if you can never go beyond, you're just a girl who makes videos for YouTube. I am the real celebrity here. I have fucking generational wealth. You know what I mean? Because when I think about that, I'm actually looking at celebrities almost as a class of their own, and they also keep that way, for example, by dating each other and
Yeah,
the whole Nepo baby discourse. Besides at all, I see this is gonna be a bit wild, but like I see almost a race of celebrities being made because
that's true.
they all date each other. They're all like cousins of someone. Legit, I was speaking to this about with my boyfriend yesterday on a call, and I was like, you know what? Sometimes Hollywood is giving European royals crossing blood with each other. You know what I
So
mean?
true though.
Like
Especially
how like
considering how like serially they date as well. And yeah, it's true. It's like keeping the status in the family.
in
Some
the family, yes. And I'm just thinking about, oh, we have a lot of Nepo babies now. When these Nepo babies also have babies with other Nepo babies, we're literally creating a race of celebrities, and they're keeping the exclusivity of stardom within the family. We're starting to already have generations of celebrities of the same families.
absolutely.
So I feel like, how is an influencer in the middle of all of this if we keep this up status of celebrity and fame in a family, in a closed circle that is passed through blood? It really, again, gives this old money, new money vibes again, because we are keeping that exclusivity and that not accessibility ever. Like you have accessibility to be us, but you will never be us because of this generation thing that is going on within Hollywood, for example. So do we have a celebrity class and do we have an influencer class that is like below of it all, you know? And me as a normal person, I'm just like, all right, this is interesting.
It is very interesting. I'm almost wondering, it makes me think whether in a couple years' time or, 20 years' time, everyone will move online, and to have a physical trade, for instance, technical skills, to have those kind of jobs, whether that will revert back and that will become the new privilege because people will be focused for, the next 10, 15 years so much on going online or going digital, on monetizing that, getting income quick, et cetera, that it will become so common that, getting higher education, for instance, or learning a trade will become so devalued initially, but at the same time, it is things that we need to progress as a society. Like we need those people. So it almost feel like these things will come back as the privileged ones because, we live in cycles and the society evolves in cycles. And it makes me feel we're approaching like a peak of the digital cycle in a way. And I'm just thinking what will happen when it starts calming down. And yeah, I really do think about that. And even now I feel like a lot of that distinction with influencers is exactly that. It's like whether you have other skills that help you distinguish yourself. It kind of makes me almost hopeful because, sometimes you look at the influencer world and it makes you very discouraged about your own pursuits and what you're doing and whether, devoting your life to getting education or to developing your career outside of that space is valuable anymore because, you could just make so much more money being online, for instance. And it can be really discouraging at times, but I guess thinking about the other side of the cycle makes me a bit more hopeful and proud of what I'm doing and of the skills that I'm developing myself, for instance,
Yeah.
because it makes me feel like not anyone can do this, but anyone can be online. And I really do think that this will become a commodity again, and this will come back as the privilege, and people online will turn to you at some point to use your services, for instance, or to, lean on your knowledge that you managed to, quietly acquire in the meantime. I hope, I really hope so. I really hope it's not just gonna be like Chat GPT and AI robots doing everything that we do right now. Yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about, like what happens after, because most people don't really think about that, because we feel it's only going to go one way, but I really don't think it will. And
No, life runs way more in cycles than linear,
exactly.
always. I even wonder, because I never thought a reality TV star would be replaced in this hierarchy with an influencer. And I'm even thinking, will one day we'll have something new? Like, I don't know. Actually, that makes me quite curious to know what the future has to hold for the the one in famous. What else will come to us? What else can you be famous for in a way?
That's very true. That's very true.
So I think to wrap up this discussion, although I could speak for this for hours because I just love this topic so much, I feel like one of the things I concluded, if we can conclude anything, was that being famous is not a place you achieve or you set yourself in, especially nowadays where anyone has their own 15 seconds of fame. It's definitely a stage that you can pass through, and more people can pass through that stage. But it's only the ones who go over it that attain that celebrity status. So although fame seems more accessible, it's not more attainable,
Yeah.
actually, I feel. I don't think it's that easy to become a celebrity. It's just more easy. Sorry, it's just easier to be famous. And those
Yeah.
are not the same thing.
Yeah, that's very true. I feel like it's about staying relevant right now, and that's the true commodity, standing the test of time and
Mm.
being on people's minds even when you're not around, It's kind of like Rihanna who hasn't released music in years and she's
But
still incredibly relevant. People, jump at her every move and follow her every step. And it's about that. It's about staying memorable.
yeah,
It's about setting the test of time. And as you said, having your 50 seconds of fame may get you famous, but it will not keep you relevant. And you have to work really hard to be able to do that. And you actually have to have something to say, I feel like, to be able to do that. In a way, I feel like that's good because I don't know, I feel like this sounds very judgmental, but I feel like it's good that to a degree this relevance is still important in some way.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it is a bit questionable at times,
Yeah.
but it's not as doomed as some people might say or criticize. And something else that I would like to add is that we usually see as accessibility as always a positive thing, but I'm also questioning if this high accessibility to fame, and that easy accessibility from the masses, although is powerful and it is in a way shaking and disrupting the wealthy celebrities, if you are someone who is against that type of wealth that they hold, isn't this just making that divide of cultural power just wider? So you are
Yeah.
closer to celebrities, but isn't like the distance between us getting even bigger exactly because we have these clear distinctions of who's famous and who's not, or who belongs to the crowd, who can sit with us and who cannot,
Yeah,
kind
exactly.
of.
It's like this thing. I saw the other day, I saw this post and it was someone doing something like super random or recording a video or, doing like a silly Vine type of thing or something weird happening to them. And like the caption was like, oh, like back in the day, this would land you on like Ellen DeGeneres show.
Mm.
And, it felt like quite interesting because, like, I feel like back in the day when unnatural things happen or like out of the ordinary things happen, it was much more visible because only a certain percentage of them would make it to the mass media and out to the public, or when like curious people would become popular again, it would only be a certain percentage of those. And as I said, fame was more curated. And right now, it's all mixed in the mass of information that we consume every single day. And yeah, and it's just, it's whoever appears more often on your feeds that will eventually maybe transcend that status and who will amass a larger following. And it's interesting to see what happens, what the future holds, as I said. Very curious. Yeah, maybe we'll record a follow-up episode. And some
When things when things
exactly,
maybe we'll do another one. Well, so now we belong to this class. We are part of the
exactly.
famous. Therefore, we have a whole new stance on it. In fact, we are great.
Yeah. Oh, I hope not. I hope we'll stay true to our, to our beliefs.
Yeah,
That ever happens. Probably not, but
for the
Well,
brand, at least.
exactly. So yeah, let us know what you think and what your opinion is on this whole phenomenon, and how do you feel about these distinctions and whether you think they're good or bad, or maybe you're ambivalent because you just don't give a shit about these people, and that's fair too.
Yeah, let us know your thoughts. And yeah, I guess we'll see you hopefully just as soon as this time.
Yeah. Bye.